Hey neighbors, the handyman here with Initiative Coffee Company, along with the Serpent of Rama himself, Jake Del Maro, and today we're talking about DDEX-02-06 Breath of the Yellow Rose. Writer Greg Marks, editors Claire Hoffman, Chris Tulach, and Travis Woodall. This is a 4-hour mod for Tier 1 play tuned for 5 third-level characters. The module features a good deal of social play, followed by the extraction of Letitia Goss from a stronghold of the Cult of Howling Hatred. The module doles out a lot of information that can be challenging to organize. General socializing. The mod starts in a party attended by nobles of Mulemaster focused on the refugees of Flan. They are Flan representatives and are trying to enlist the aid of Mulemaster to take the city back from the Cult of the Dragon. The party is tasked to secure the support of Mulemaster's elite. Part 1, please. Zor Garwal Goss is willing to vouch for the Flan contingent on the party's behalf if they find his sister. It would embarrass his family to involve the Watch or the Hawks, so he's gone to mercenaries instead. Jake, when we look at the beginning of this mod, there are, let's say, problems organizationally in terms of flow. Why don't you point out a few of them, and we'll go over them kind of one by one here.
Let's do a compliment sandwich here. The meat's not great, but the compliments start. What we've been talking about is calling back previous mods. Mm-hmm. We have Zor Kolkin and we have Mr. Saj who are hosting this party. That is what we've been talking about. Having people from your past.
That's true.
Incorporated into your starts.
Yeah,
but
and it incorporates season 1 characters as well, so it gives some validity to kind of a breathing continent and a breathing region that interrelates with each other throughout the seasons. But that might be the best I have to say about this part of the module.
So I love the writing. I do. I think it's got a lot of info and content, but the train wreck is here. Sure. It's like, unless you're doing like some of the hooks, you have Order of the Gauntlet hooks, you've got Lords Alliance hooks. But what's the purpose of doing those if you've already had an established relationship? Or in current season times, we don't have factions unless someone has either previously had an AL character or they just understand what's going on. I honestly would have zero idea as a new player as to why you do that. But it's the problem is that those faction assignments, those hooks, are really kind of imperative, or I guess those faction hooks, those assignments are really important for later on parts of the story that seem to play a significant role. Sure. But then have like zero context. I don't know. It like even running this mod a few times, it makes me feel like uncertain. Makes me feel uncertain about my DM capacity because like. They have situations here, and we're not even into the adventure introduction. This is an adventure pre-part 1. Like they have, I don't know. You have these people that are running around shirtless because they're on drugs. Yeah. In the same room with people going like, "Oh, have you heard about the latest fad and fashion?" And then like people are going literally crazy. Yeah. It feels like a party that's like people somehow got the invitation towards. And for me, I wouldn't want to be at this party. Like, if I was a Mulemasterite and I was supposed to be, like, being wooed, this is not...
Yeah, it's tough to say the very least. You know, there's not a lot of direction here. And part of you wants to say, like... I will give the benefit of the doubt to this mod insofar as it was written at a time when factions were part of character creation. Right.
It was so, the other part. Like, it was not just backgrounds. Like, you were also part of a faction, which was important.
Which was important. And so the idea of tying adventure hooks to factions, if more modules had done this, we might not be in a situation of play currently where factions were gone. Right? Yeah. Like, if there was more attention paid to factions throughout the modules, we wouldn't be in a situation where, like, if you don't have that one background feature, factions are irrelevant. Right?
Yeah, I 100% agree with that.
That said, playing the module in 2020 or beyond, right? It takes a lot of work to make your players engaged in this very kind of odd mission. You know, if they've played season 1, You can rely on that Hero of Flan adventure hook. The problem is if they played a lot of season 1, they're not levels 1 through 5, right?
They wouldn't have known what happened in season 1 because the characters would all have been in tier 2.
Yeah.
But like this is more of like a metagaming knowledge. Like, oh, I remember her. She was around all the time. But it's like, yeah, but your character doesn't know anything about this person.
Right.
I struggle with this mod and the fact that it's like they're doing a lot of the things that we've spoken about, like using callbacks and the like, but
in the worst way possible.
Yeah, in a way that was like so info dumpy.
Yeah.
Like even with your section about general socializing, there is about 2/3 of a page in just what happens and like kind of like, hey, a guy jabs you and says, have you seen all the colors? Like it's like what's going on? Yeah. Like it's supposed to make a surreal feeling, but it has a lot of world building characteristics that maybe doesn't happen in the first 6 seconds of a mod.
Yeah, this strikes me as a situation where there were too many like initial ideas and none of them got developed, right? Like it seems like, and this isn't necessarily a criticism of Greg Marks, because I've played through a lot of his mods that are very good.
They're awesome.
But there are a lot of I go through a lot of mods, and we'll probably get to them in later seasons, where I read through it, I run it, I play through it, and it strikes me that the outline for this module was little more than notes on a bar napkin, because there just isn't a lot of development for all of these like initial ideas that don't really go anywhere but take up time and space.
Yeah, I think if you want to, I could push it to a positive, maybe to, I don't know, this doesn't really sum up my end of my sandwich of things I want to talk about, but like I'll throw in some nice little zesties, condiments or stuff. I do like the fact that the characters can kind of go on their own.
Sure.
But when you give your characters back their character agency, it's kind of hard to say, hey, what do you want to do now? See, there's 2 different groups of people. You got the first one that's got the Goss, and you got the other one that's got Ryasa and Thylius, who are going to be major components later on.
Sure.
But like, once again, that just spanned like 2 separate sections. Like, not only that, it goes from general socializing into part 1. That stuff, but there's 3 pages in between.
Yeah, and it's a little bit frustrating, like, and that's what I mean in terms of like the organization and outline of this module is like, we're 3 pages in and we haven't started the mod yet.
I'm 3 pages in and I'm exhausted from talking.
Yeah, and it's laid out in such a way that you would think like the beginning of the mod would be part 1, because that's the structure of most of the other modules that we've gone through in seasons 1 and 2. But there's this strange like prelude section that doesn't really hold up on its own in any meaningful way, that leads into what should be, the second part of part 1, that doesn't have a clear distinction between like this prelude part and like the mission, right? And so I struggle to get engaged with this module. I struggle to find the tools. There's a lot of information here and a lot of like content, but I don't have the tools given to me by the writers to distribute that content in an effective and engaging way. The
other issue, I hate beating this dead horse, but like they have Flan. They have they've got a box text about Flan. And, who's here? You got Aled Burrell. Oh, my goodness. You got Aya Glenmere. Super cool. You got this other dude who we've never met really before. But, like, you got 2 iconic characters that do play important roles later on in further seasons, whether I believe they come up in Reclamation of Flan, the epic DDEP-04. But, like, they don't... And new adventurers have no freaking idea who this Flan person is. And experienced adventurers aren't going to be playing 2-6. No, not at all. You know what I mean? Like, there's not enough in this module for Tier 1 to get people to, like, go back to Tier 1. Tier 1 is a tough sell. I enjoy Tier 1 to an extent because it tells me what my characters are bad at. But even with that caveat, I get tired of Tier 1 play because you can't do anything. Well, right? The other thing is if I remember correctly, she's dead, and she gets brought back to life.
Yeah.
And I think that happens in, I want to honestly say, one of the tier 2 mods for season 2, which is like 2.2 or 2.3. I don't know, by 2.3 or 2.4. And like she's mentioned again, and that's the first time I guess you would be able to have one of your tier 2 characters from season 1 meet her again. But like she's a stark contrast, different person compared to who she was when you encountered her in tier 1. Or that's how it's supposed to be played. She's got a very different soul about her. But I guess moving on from that, you have your interactions from Ryasa and Thylius. Like you're gonna garner some info. Like small notes here. I would definitely make sure you mention the fact that you like in this whole social interaction, even including Goss, you need to mention the Wicked Tart. Honestly, that's really you could cut out a good chunk of this info, like, and just say go to the Wicked Tart.
And like I get that you want to have extra info to like create like a living, breathing feeling behind it, but this seems like an extreme that just kind of takes that too far.
There's one part in here that kind of bothers me. She's been missing for 10 days. This other person, this Letitia Goss, the other main VIP, for 10 days, and they brush it off by saying she's run off for a few times before, but she usually turns up a few days later.
Yeah, she's
been missing for 40 days.
Yeah.
That is irresponsible. I will go back and be forward and say Letitia didn't even know about what Andrik did, who's her brother, who's the brother of Garl Goss. Like, there's so much, like, this family, first and foremost, is worse than what's happening in this mod. Is literally a detriment to themselves, and like they have no control of what's going on. Where are their parents?
Yeah, and like, how did they become nobles? Like, part of this is like, what? I don't understand the status. First of all, I fundamentally don't understand the status of Zors in Mulemaster.
It seems more and more like wealth, but at the same time, it's like, I guess, sway in community, but like there's no way. Like they're like saying, oh, these guys, like the reason why you're trying to get Garl Goss is because he's like a successful, like his family runs a successful smithery, or that kind of thing, and they're trying to like support that stuff. And by the way, you're just trying to get this guy support. Everyone else from Mulemaster hates Flan, just point blank. And the real reason here is get Garl Goss, and he's like, yeah, I'll support you. Just find my sister. Like, that's all you got to do. And apparently his sway is enough, which still does not speak to the fact that his family's a nightmare. Yeah.
And like, why would his sway be enough? There's no indication of like, because like, if all of these Zors and Zora, I don't know what the plural of Zora is, but if all of these nobles are of equal footing, why would his sway be any more valuable than literally anybody else in the room? Other than like, he's the one offering it to you. Right?
Yeah, I think that's really it. And I think I go as far to say at this point, because I haven't said it and I wanted to highlight it enough, there's about 40 people. It's like 30 to 40 new names that are introduced that are as like dramatis personnel kind of thing, where it's like 2 sentences like, this person went missing. Right. And it's like no other background and information. And if I'm running this online, I've got my online copy up. I have to literally push Control F to find out who this person is, what they're doing. And even then, that's like, that's like, oh, this minor character, which draws me back to this whole issue of finding of the adventure hooks with the Lord's Alliance. You have to find this person named Ayer Afapanov. And
who comes up far more frequently than Letitia does throughout
Goss.
The module, despite the module being focused on Letitia Goss.
I have an enormous issue with it. She's brought up between box texts. She is more important, and she's mentioned so many more times in terms of pushing the party forward than Letitia Goss.
Yeah, and at some point, like, why isn't this quest about finding?
How about the both of them?
Right. Either one, but her specifically, if she's so much more important and such a bigger asset to the Lord's Alliance, you would think you would want this organization on your side rather than one noble house. I don't know. It's tough. It doesn't really track with me. It's going to take some work as a DM to get engaged. I don't know if I'm playing, and I haven't played Season 1, if I really care about retaking Flan, because there hasn't been a real good like exploration as to why that's important, other than probably dragons are bad. Like,
And it's a major city, but even then, major cities have their own thing. We've had Zental Keep, which has been
major
ransacked about
city is
87
relative
times.
too, you know, like it's a major city, I guess, because there's a season of AL about it.
Well,
but it's not
the worst
like,
part about it, I was doing research. Mole Master has about 50,000 people.
sure,
It's not even like, whenever I think of Mole Master, you see the maps and you hear what's going on, and I always think it's like 150,000 plus.
right.
So you're going 50,000. I'm like, this is like a small village.
Yeah, it's like it's by D&D standards, I guess it's substantial. That makes it like a small city.
But they have so much stuff going on. Like, we have 4 elemental cultists plus the red wizards.
Why would they
vying
target
for
this town?
50K?
Yeah, like
Like
it's tough. And like it's tough because when you think about it, you extend it out to the hard book, right? You think of Princes of the Apocalypse, and the region is not that populated, right?
Yeah.
So like, why are they establishing their foothold in Red Larch? Because they can, maybe.
It's about 170 people on a good day, like,
right? Because like it doesn't take long to get rid of all of those people, I guess,
and replace them with cultists. That's all you got to do. You just got to
right.
eventually beat into them the fact that it's cultists run now,
but
and they all turn to cultists.
Yeah, but at least the hard book has like the justification of the cult is operating from this stronghold that's been around for millennia.
Yeah.
And that's the city that just happens to be on top of it. But like, I struggle with Mole Master, A, because it's a dump and it will remain a dump throughout the rest of Adventures League, but B, because I don't understand why it's a focal point for all of this disaster.
Well, this like adventure brings up another thing. I definitely do like this adventure for the fact that it has a multi-pronged aspect to it. It does bring up, you know, different characters in a rescue mission, and it has a lot chalked into it. Good or bad, intent was good. One of the other driving forces, which haven't been, that to my knowledge has not been truly highlighted, is there is a dark side of Mole Master. Surprise, surprise. There is a drug trade.
Yeah.
And they go into detail about it, and I think that is neat for background purposes to help color in Mole Master for what it is. There is the good and the extreme good. There's the seedier watch. There's the, you know, the nobles for whatever they're worth. And then you have like the despair. You have the drug trades and that coming in. And part of your adventure is kind of tracking this silk route that is extremely expensive, extremely rare, and like is a potential lead. Depending on how much your players are, you know, eyes glossed over with the amount of times they've heard a new proper noun. That's kind of up to them, but like there are neat aspects, and like Silk Route is one that jumps out because it is a very new term,
right?
Without having the words like Stefan Rowick,
right?
Like Silk Route is easier to write down than Stefan Rowick.
And it's an easier concept, like a new concept, like drug trade is new to this module, right? So that's an easier thing to keep track of than just another NPC, even if you establish it as like, oh, this is a noble, so is everyone else we've encountered. You know,
there's more nobles per capita this place than there are just common folk.
What are they noble over? I don't understand. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if the population of Mole Master is 50,000 people, 40,000 of them are nobles and 10,000 of them are
that's why everyone is upset,
miserable, you know. Like, it's a very confusing kind of layout. All of that is not the responsibility of this particular module, right? Like the status of Mole Masterites and the noble distribution is not necessarily solely a problem of this module. I think it's a problem that exists throughout the season and throughout AL later on, but this module doesn't do anything to make it clearer or better or resolve any of those concerns. And it's not necessarily this mod's obligation to do that, but it leans in pretty heavily to make matters worse, or at least just as confusing.
I agree.
Part 2, Inquiry. There is a lot of skill checks. Players can follow up on any of the concepts name dropped in Part 1. Following the information dump, players can investigate several other people and locations for even more information.
Hey, no, I'm gonna take charge on this one. Hey, I heard you like just rolling for stuff, and you definitely love the idea of scavenger hunts without the scavenger hunt concept. How do you feel about this, Brian?
Bad. I feel bad. I hate it. I don't like it. It's a lot of skill checks that are seemingly irrelevant. All of them seem to have something to do with the module, but ultimately, like, it's skill checks for the sake of skill checks. Like, I like the notion of trying to incorporate like information gathering in creative and like organic ways, but this is neither creative nor organic. It's literally just saying, like, do you want more information on any of the things that you've just learned? If so, make a roll.
Without much prompting. I think that's my issue.
With very little prompting, right? Like,
it's like you have to give the disclosure, like, hey, if you guys want to look into certain topics, let me know.
Right, and there's like half a dozen, maybe 8 different things you can make checks on. Most of them are people. None of them like.
All of it actually is super important. It is important enough to add more color, but like, like the one that I would immediately jump at is Yellow Breath, because I mean that's the name of this mod, or close to it. Like, that's something that would be kind of worth looking into. And like the idea is that even the info you gather is kind of like the one that definitely I would jump at is Silk Root. You're not gonna I mean, you might gather some info, and this might be a situation if you've ran this mod before, or you're trying to, or you're taking some extensive notes on it, and you're here on the channel right now. Like, you could take some of this info and dump it into the beginning section where they already have enough. They've got 1,000 different parts of information, and that's what they gather instead. You'd be like, hey, you hear blah blah blah. Like there's definitely ways to incorporate this information in the hearings, or a perception check, which I'm not too much of a fan of. But like, let's say someone is comes up to you when you're next to the hors d'oeuvres table, and someone's like, oh, haven't you heard about? And then I think that's one of the actual things they do. But maybe that's a way that you can engage them in conversation, where it's like this, the 700s club, and you have or the Golden Girls Club, where they're all sitting around just talking. This could be one of those situations where you drop some info that maybe isn't a DC 20, but you change that stuff and give it to them, because this is a lot of good info about motives that could prove to be useful. But it's I'm not going to tell my people to take 1d4 hours and cost them 1d6 in bribes and drinks, after which they can make a charisma persuasion check to garner such information. Who is in their right mind got enough time at their table? I mean, this is a long mod. The DM just speaking takes up over half the mod.
It's frustrating because not only does it add unnecessary time to the mod, it focuses on 1 or 2 characters at your table who have decent persuasion scores. It's really cutting out a good deal of your table, right? And I think it's easy to go down that line of thought and say well, you have to say I'm advocating for everything to be combat focused. I'm not, right? But I think on the back of what could be up to an hour of social encounters, of intro, of background, to add another background section seems,
and then another one. It's relentless attempts to force roleplay.
And some of these don't necessarily need to be charisma persuasion checks, right? I think you could make an argument that Silk Root is a nature check,
Yeah.
Right? You could make an argument that Yellow Breath is a religion check.
Yeah.
Right?
Just be creative. If your players are doing this, I don't let the barbarian feel like he's being like, unless he's a very persuasive barbarian, but like have it be creative with what you're doing. If somebody wants to speak with animals and they know that this is Letitia Goss's horse, I don't.
Whatever. Yeah. Cool.
Just make it happen. Like honestly, like it's kind of comes down to the fact that like there are some gems in here. The one that I think has always been touched on in my tables is the Silk Root. I've never had anyone ask about Afapavnov. I think like it varies, and even my seasoned players don't do it.
Yeah, the other issue I have is like the information provided is not the pertinent information for the module.
Yeah.
Right? Like you look at Yellow Breath, and the thing that is most interesting, like the thing that is most relevant for me to know about Yellow Breath is like the core tenets of Yellow Breath. So when I find this like sanctuary of the Yellow Breath later on in the mod, I can realize, oh, that's not the real Yellow Breath, right? Like those are imposters masking themselves as this organization, but there's no indication of like what the organization does, other than like starve themselves, right?
Yeah.
And so there's no understanding of like what a sect of this organization looks like, or by extension what it doesn't look like. So all of this information ends up being kind of irrelevant to the mod itself.
Yeah. I guess we continue moving on and out of that thing, and you run into immediately next section is Air's family.
Yeah.
You have to be Lord's Alliance to know about this person. I'm just gonna flat out say it. Like, do yourself a favor, remove this person. Like,
just cut it. Just cut the whole section.
Because it's like the first thing they say is Zora Afapavov is on vacation. It's like, if this is not a bigger middle finger to you, I don't know what is. Like, I think the most important thing is just, if you want to make your life easier, just take a big Sharpie or take something and just remove every time it says Era. Maybe put Letitia instead. Yeah. I don't know. I think that might be easier for everyone's sanity. Even if it says Letitia twice, only say it once. Yeah. Like, there you go. Ryasa Yagorovna. She's crazy about Thylius, so she's going to do whatever. Like, that's fact. Then you got to get to the Wicked Tart. Wicked Tart, very interesting place. It is super cool. Like it. You can kind of be a little rude to
There's some cool stuff about this cafe. Yeah, it's a little bit like an Ed the Bevic kind of situation.
Yeah, just be rude to your characters. That's all I gotta say.
Yeah, like it's kind of a fun encounter in the middle of what could be. The problem is if you've already lost your party, if you've already lost the table and they're kind of like checked out at this point, this isn't going to bring them back.
No, it's not.
So it's a tough call, and I think it's easy to have lost your players by this point. Roic and Kukulska, more names that know a little bit about Letitia, but frankly, like, why are we spending time with these characters? You know, like,
the only way I saw, like you said, losing a character, I picked on is the wrong word. I picked, I guess, a character and flagged them over by these two NPCs, and that did kind of bring people back in after a very weird session start.
Sure.
Make them a people watcher. Make them create a story about, create a secondary. I know we don't need to make more NPCs, but then like be like, what do you think of the waitress? What do you think her real story is? Because like you already get a lot of info about her, like being like in her role. Like, have them come up with a people watching story, and then have a mini interaction with these two other NPCs, and then like if they do a good job, I don't say if, just like have arbitrary check here, or if even not, be like, hey, that was a good one, or like, hey, what about this other person, and then or have them talk about another character, which could be if you have a familiar same table party that you've had over the last couple of adventures, this could be a situation where it's like they could talk about another one of their PCs, as long as it's comfortable, and they're, I don't say everyone's friends, but like, you know, we are like agreeing upon the fact that this is okay. Make up like a story about them, and then it had them get flagged over by the other two NPCs, Stefan and Rahel, and be like, is it true? And like it's a cool way to re-engage,
Mhm.
but I definitely see that this is like a point where this is a pivotal point in your like character's mod,
Mhm.
where like either this is going to stick or it's not, because
And-
this is important for the next step in the adventure.
Yeah, and at this point, we're either 10 minutes into the mod or 2 hours into the mod.
Yeah.
And that's the issue, is there's no predictability here because everything is so roleplay focused.
Yeah.
And based off, like, hoping the players decide what they want to do, that, like, there's no real way to predict, unless you know your table very well, like, how they're going to engage with these sections of the module.
Yeah.
Thylius' family, Jake, I don't know. Like, it's more like, at least Thylius is a relevant character to the rest of the story.
You're not gonna like. I had one player decide to follow him, and then like I was like, you got back to the monastery. Like,
Yeah,
that's all I'm gonna give you. Like, I'm not. Everything else, it's like, oh, okay, so you just got roadblocked because he's part of I believe the Blades or something.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, because his dad's a tax collector.
Sure.
For like the nobles, of course, and like.
Yeah.
Okay, like skip the section, people. Like,
then
so you're gonna get more
smoke shop.
very, very, very fun interactions here.
Sure.
This guy is an illegal drug dealer.
Yeah.
Like,
and also a legal drug dealer. He also sells tobacco.
Like,
but in addition to legal practices, he has illegal practices as well.
Yeah. But like, play it up. If the guys want to look at like spices and stuff, just be like, you found stuff from a faraway land. You found stuff from Cholt. I don't know. Like, I'd make it fun. I think it's interesting. He can be as much as you play him. That is, you steal Ristic, that guy smokes shop. You can play him as much or as little as you want.
There's a group of intellectuals in here as well.
More names.
More names. I might just default to Statler and Oswald and just play them like the Muppets in the balcony.
That's kind of how I see them. They're a little ridiculous. But they do have good info.
Sure.
They're like, they give like the second bullet point where to say like Letitia don't include air.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know. Like, you can. It's just like, it's at this point you're probably flipping back in the mod and going, who the heck is this air person again?
Yeah, again.
Just being like, hey, like, they're relevant. And it also gives information about Thylius. I don't think is mentioned beforehand. He's bought property outside the city, or around the city somewhere, and that's where his fad of the, like, I think that goes back to kind of what you said, like, what is the Yellow Breath?
Yeah.
And they outright mention that it is a fad. And like, to me, that's kind of like that's kind of like can be taken either way, where it's like, oh, is it actually real, or is it like just someone trying to make a quick buck?
It's a fad. So are flip-flops and sunglasses. Like, I don't know, like, you know what I mean? Like, because later on in the mod it describes the Yellow Breath as being as this group not being of the real tenants of the Yellow Breath.
Yeah.
And how Thylius is taking advantage of this growing popular social movement throughout the region and bringing like his version of it to Mulmaster to make money or to advance the whims of the cult. Like, it's very unclear on his motivations as well. Maybe both, I guess. I guess they're not mutually exclusive. He could be like trying to profit and also advancing the interests of the cult.
Yeah.
So like they call it a fad, but like it's a growing movement throughout.
I think it discredits though when somebody can third the word fad. I think it's like, it
strikes me as like not legitimate, and like maybe that's my own preconceived notion, but
no, I think that's that's kind of what I was going for. It is, I think they're pointing it because they're called the theorists, like that it is a trend of a sorts, but also the other parts of this mod with the previous set of NPCs at the shop, they mention that these Letitia and Air are also all about the new fad movement. It's like, oh, we have tank tops are the new fad, and it's like, we are all about the tank tops.
And I guess like there's a mirror here that like people called computers a fad for a long time, and now they rule the world. So like there's some traction there, but it just doesn't. The wording just strikes me as awkward, and kind of misleading.
This whole scene reminds me of like people that, or not reminds me of people. It would be like if someone had watched Mean Girls, or it's like us watching Mean Girls. It's like us watching everything that's going on because it's like, oh my god, that's so fetch, and it's like that kind of thing. It just feels like something not. It doesn't place the importance of what's going on. Like we have had previous adventures where like people are trying to light the entirety of Mole Master on fire.
Yeah.
And then you have this situation where it's like, this is how far off track we've talked. We've talked for the last however many minutes, and the one thing that has not been brought up is saving Flan.
Yeah. The whole purpose
which was an entire page of this.
The ostensive purpose of this mod. The reason you're on this mission to save Flan, and we haven't mentioned it since we talked about the first section of the module. Yeah, I don't know. It's
you could actually, I would almost go as far, like after this whole recap, remove that. Remove it 100%. Make it another social gathering. Don't include Aled Burrell. Don't include any of those people. Mm-hmm. Just make it just do yourself a favor.
Because there's no follow-up on it either.
Yeah. Do yourself a favor, Mr. or Mrs. DM. Get rid of that stuff. Take a bigger Sharpie, cross out that entire page, and just make it less complicated.
Yeah. Less
there
steps.
You go.
Yep. Part 3, From Above. A fight with dust methods. Well, at least there's combat now.
I hesitate where we're at in the timing of this mod. Like, this is just a relief. The fight is so, like, 2 seconds. Like,
it's 4 dust methods. And it's like, what did dust methods? 22 hit points. So it's
17
80,
hit points.
17
They
hit
blind
points,
you, and they can do 4 damage. Like this is like a give me. Like even the adjustments I think are probably pretty ridiculous.
This is here to satiate.
Add more dust methods.
Yeah, this is here to satiate your fighters and barbarians who don't have good social checks, don't have good intelligence checks, and just want to huck dice. They're at your table because they want to hit stuff, and like.
I do like how they built it, though. I think it's like they've given, like, hey, there's a guy that will come and help you if things start going really awry. Like, the wine cart dude's going to go over and just, like, pull you out of combat.
Right.
Like, I do like that.
Sure.
I do like how that combat part is, like, and
the setup is decent, right? Like, the notion that, like, Thylius has found out you're asking about him, so he summons dust methods to waylay you, I guess. Like... Sure, like there's something there, but like it's not a meaningful combat. It's not a
this combat
that
has
like,
waylaid me.
resources necessarily, because presumably you'll get them back before, like you'll take a rest before you try to invade the compound. Like I don't know. It's here, and it's a nice breakup in the the honestly monotonous duration of like social encounters and information dumps, but it doesn't strike me as meaningful in any way other than to break up that.
This section to me is very much also a point in your tables, like in and out of consciousness with how much info being given. If you just be outright and be like, hey, there's a fight with 4 dust methods, it's going to take probably as much time setting this up as it will for you guys to kill them. Do you guys just want to keep trudging?
Yeah.
And I hate doing that to mods, but there is a real factor here where people are either going to like the mod or they're not going to like the mod. And
honestly, when I play this mod, by this point, I'm ready to be done for the night.
Yeah. But that's also part of the job of the DM, I think, that and our ideas here. We've harped on this mod, but the thing is there's a lot of stuff you can cut out that is not necessary, but requires pre-reading. Yeah. If you're gonna run this cold, good luck. I hope.
I wouldn't. First of all, I wouldn't run anything cold, but like this mod specifically,
you're at a con,
do not run this mod cold. Like
if you're at a con and somebody hands you this mod, you just be like, hand me a different mod.
Right.
Like
I'm not sure that will come up because season 2 mods don't come up at many convention play, but
there is times that Mole Master highlighted adventures do come up.
That's fair.
Just ignore this mod. Just act like they didn't just rip it in half. Don't rip it in half.
That's
staple
rude,
it,
but
put on the paper for another day,
Mhm.
and just stuff it in your bag, and be like, "Can I have a different mod?"
Yeah, it's
And
tough.
if they insist on you running that mod, be like, "Do you know what you're getting into?"
Right. Because I don't, because this is seemingly a mess.
This is a 41-page mod.
It's 41 pages, and like 12 of them are relevant. It's tough. It really is, and it's a struggle to get through. But we are still going. Part 4. The Mole Master job. The player's search leads them to a chapter house of the Yellow Breath. It's not actually a chapter house of the Yellow Breath. The tenants of the Yellow Breath are being exploited by Thylius for personal and culty gains. Yeah, I mean, like, this is what I mean when I talk about like the importance of the Yellow Breath information coming up earlier. Is like, there's no way to know this unless you know about the Yellow Breath. And if you don't know that this isn't the practices of the Yellow Breath before you go in, it's irrelevant to be in the mod, right? Like, if the information never gets disseminated, it's not important information.
I have an issue with the setup of this entire section, and I'm just putting it out here before even Brian goes to the next part, is that the goal here feels very unclear. Just because, like, you really don't know what to do. You know Letitia Goss here, you know, I guess Ayers here, but the other side of it is, it's like, even if you added all the people here that are like quote unquote enemy NPCs, it actually isn't even that like intense. Like, you could fight your way through this compound. It would be difficult, but it wouldn't be like impossible.
Sure.
And like, I think that's a struggle to the feel for me, because like, it's a huge compound, and then you have situations where it's like 12 people.
It's 15 rooms and less than one person per room.
Yeah, and like some people are like doubled up in rooms.
Yeah.
Like, they're not. There's a kitchen, but like that'll be in a moment. But like, I just struggle here because it gives so much world building for this, or I guess this area building, that it lets it follows on the DM to where people are, what their motives are, because it really doesn't explain explicitly what the point of it here is.
Mm-hmm.
Because reality, if somebody's invading an area, the nobles are not going to be useful because they're like starving. And then you have like a couple thugs, but like, what good would it show them if they start killing people?
Yeah.
So like, I have this weird like while we're above ground aspect of like, would they really try to kill them? Also, like, I just struggle with intention here with the NPCs.
Sure.
And what to do with them.
Also, like, it's a growing organization, so like they would be reaching out for new members, right?
Yeah.
So like, why would your players be attacked on sight? Maybe they're just curious. Maybe Thylius is keen to the fact that they've been asking about him, and maybe that's why. But you're going to have to come up with ways as a DM to incorporate that intent into Thylius and his subordinates here. I don't know. It's a struggle.
I think the other thing is having played at Greg Marx's table, I understand that even how you said it, like, these are like notes from a bar napkin, but like, that kind of is how he runs, and not in a disrespectful manner. He runs very off the cuff.
Sure.
And like, very good notes, but I think the one note that was missing is like, what is Thylius trying to do? Like, he's not gonna, like, for instance, Letitia is gonna be with Thylius. He's not gonna outright attack, because that'd be like kind of like, and the other girl is gonna be there. Like, he's not gonna outright attack. It would look really bad on him.
Yeah.
And like, I think that's the one part that's missing from this mod. So I think you got to be very, if you are running this mod, you need to be very clear on what your intentions are when your players hit this area is going to be. I think that is like first and foremost. It's kind of hard to make stuff up on the fly because it won't be coherent.
And that's not necessarily a challenging transition, right? It could be as easy as like, he offers membership, and when the players say no, he attacks, right? Maybe he's that fervent in his belief. Maybe he's concerned about the people that are under his charge, and having intruders in this compound is dangerous for their safety. Like, there are a lot of excuses you could come up with as to why he has a sudden change of heart here.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, it's tough because Letitia has like befriended him, right? And he's showing a lot of attention. And to go from that to both of them attacking players just seems like an abrupt shift.
Well, Letitia wouldn't, but it's still like, I just kind of hold it to the degree of like.
I mean,
so
she wouldn't, but she does in the next section, right? Like in the combat section, it specifically says like he and a thug and Letitia engage in combat.
I guess that's kind of where I draw the line. I'm like, I don't think that they would do that.
Yeah.
Like, but that's the next section.
Right. Anyway, speaking of the next section, Chapter House of the Yellow Breath. The party navigates their way through the compound to find Letitia Goss and remove her from the compound. She's found with Thylius in his room along with thugs. After a fight with Thylius, the leader of this branch of the cult flees to his secret underground bunker. Letitia is uncooperative and will have to be restrained to be taken home. If the party pursues Thylius to the bunker, they're met with additional combat from Mephit's cultists, griffins, and chemical weapons. Yeah, I don't... There's 15 rooms here that the party needs to... I guess doesn't need to, right? Like, one thing I will say about this mod is it does a good job of, like, outlining a whole... I don't want to say dungeon necessarily, but a whole locale, right? In a very similar way to the hard books that have, like, numbers for every room located in the keep, right?
Yes.
You don't have to go in all those rooms, but if you do go in those rooms, this is what's there.
Yeah.
And so to that degree, I think this is pretty well organized in terms of like the locale.
It's just what's happening with the NPCs.
Yeah, it's just not believable, right? Like,
I can't believe that there's a guy that's sitting here on the second floor that they got an aviary and they've got like a feather that's holding it in place to see if it's been like tampered with or not. I'm like, who cares?
Right.
Like
why are we worried about if somebody goes in the aviary?
And let's say they don't, then you cut out an axe beak and like 2 swarms of pigeons or whatever they had
Ravens
going on
or something,
there.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, that's an avoidable combat. It just, there's a lot of... There's just name dropping again with like, oh, this thug is with 3 nobles, and it's like they're just faking it till they make it, and it's like,
and like your goal here is to find and extract Letitia, right? So like the real compelling part of like the real interesting combat here is in a dungeon below the compound that if you're focused on your goal, you are not going to engage in. Right? Like, if your goal is to remove Letitia from this compound, you're going to go in, you're going to get her, you're going to remove her. Like, you're not going to follow Thylius if you're focused on the task you were given.
You can be done with the mod. Like, very clearly, you could be just done with this mod.
Yep.
The other thing I believe was mentioned earlier is that Thylius was seen with a monk, but I think you only can like, get that if, like, you once again did your research, and like that I guess might be another reason you go, because it looks like there's been a monk that comes up for fresh air and that's it.
Sure.
And like he's a true yellow breath guy. And like I don't know. I agree with what you're saying here. That's, I guess I should first and foremost, maybe that's my sandwich finish, is like like it's I like the throwbacks from the beginning, and at the end, I like how it's built. I don't like the NPC movements because they're not explicitly explained.
Sure.
And if you're to be realistic here, this is a point in time, season 2, 5 years ago, where AL was still getting its footing, like as a normal, like as an organization. You could have ran this thing 4th time as a DM, or like this was your 4th time or 4th mod to run. This thing would have been extremely difficult and would have it could have, this mod alone could honestly be the reason why people do or don't DM
or play D&D
like
D&D, not just AL. Like if this was the introduction to D&D I gave one of my high school students or one of my junior high kids, this might be the thing that made them think like, I think I'll stick to video games. This isn't for me.
Yeah. And like that also falls on the onus of the DM, because then it's
Sure.
like you're taking on this task. But like
Yeah.
if I was highlighting this thing, it would have been like notes everywhere.
Yeah.
Because this thing is just, it's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to fault Greg Marks for it. It's just like, it's a lot. There's a lot going on, and like it does leave a lot for the DM to fill in blanks.
Yeah.
It's Mole Master, and there's a lot of blanks to be filled, and adding 30 something different NPCs is maybe not the way to do it.
Yeah.
But it is what it is, and I'm gonna skip all the dormitory parts. But let's say they do take the hook, they go downstairs.
Mm-hmm.
You have a cool area that is to explore, and sorry for interrupting. What are you gonna say?
No, I think what Marx is trying to do here is push forward a lot of information that is just missing, right? Like information for the rest of the season that's valuable. I just don't think it is terribly successful.
That information belongs in background information, not. I mean, some of it does, but like you could cut out. You could just cut words, and that's the issue.
Yeah.
I mean, I like the end of this fight. I like these. I'm gonna skip past every NPC that's above board here, minus the Thylius encounter. I just immediately have him make one attack and then run, and then he just kind of does like a slide tech. That's how I imagine it. I think he just has a big spiral slide, even though it's not. It's just woo! It goes all the way down. Also, another issue, a very glaring issue, on the map. There is a little pathway called S, that has S on the first floor, on ground level, and it's very hard for someone to go, "What's that?" or not go, "What's that?"
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, it's the part where it says secret door.
Right.
There's no explicable area there, and I think it's like one of those kind of like,
yeah.
If you're handing your players a map,
yeah, and there's like in a field. It's like in a field. There's like a path to a secret door in a field.
Yeah.
There's nothing covering it. It's just a secret door to this underground compound. Is it like the Lost Hatch? Like, I don't know. I don't really. I'm having trouble envisioning it.
Teleported to a different area.
Yeah,
clearly.
I'm not sure. Anyway, in conclusion, if Letitia is returned alive to Zorgos, he does what he can to aid Flan. If she's not, he doesn't. I mean, I don't look. There's a lot of work in this mod to seemingly resolve issues from prior mods, right?
It doesn't feel good as an end. It's like
doesn't work.
He pours you a drink. I'm grateful for what you've done, and it's like, okay,
yeah, and like,
thanks.
Part of me is like, at this point, like, we're 4 mods into the season. There are elemental cults attacking Mole Master. You've just uncovered the elemental earth cult, and none of the nobles care that there are 4 cults active in Mole Master, right? Like, that's the thing. That's where I'm like, all right, we have to really start looking at this. Like, there's no interest in the part of like the Watch or the Noblery or the Hawks or.
Well, the other thing I would mention is, with that in mind, is like this was, if you can, I mean, not all the mods, not everyone has been represented yet, but out of the mods that have been played, this is a less, to me at least, a less motivating story than 2-1, the very first one, when you have the dude from the different cult, or from the like posing to be an actual priest, just saying like, the hatred of itself as the vengeance of a family is reason enough for the storm to bring the storms back. And honestly, that was a lot more motivating of a story than whatever this was.
Yeah, it was
done in an hour.
It just doesn't feel like there's any build, right? That's my concern. Is like all of these cults are active. Like the community doesn't care. We're not building to anything. There's no final It doesn't seem like there's going to be any final confrontation toward the end of the season. And maybe there is. We haven't gotten there yet. I haven't run all of season 2. But ultimately, I just don't know where it's going. I don't see it like there's no like developing action here. that makes me think that there's like an overarching story that's going to be rewarding, enjoyable, motivating, engaging.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. So there it is, DDX-02-06 Breath of the Yellow Rose. Thank you so much for listening to some advice to streamline or maybe skip running this at your tables. Be a good neighbor, give us a thumbs up and subscribe. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Patreon. From now until the next time, roll together.